Would you rather be happy or right? My name is Yitz. I'm the rabbi of Young Israel, Aish of Las Vegas, and welcome to the Life is Great community, where we are always exploring new ways to live our best lives. So very often we find ourselves in a position of, do I want to just let things go and be happy, or do I want to stick up for my rights, what I really feel I deserve? Take an extreme example of this. You have a couple, they're married for several years, they have a few kids, and then they just kind of realize, this is just not, I don't want to grow old with this person. It's not going to work. They don't necessarily fight. They're not against each other. They're going to get divorced. And then one of them makes the dreadful mistake of hiring an attorney to make sure that they get everything they're supposed to get. Of course, always be wary of people who make a living by the hour. Okay, charging by the hour. Okay, just be wary of them. Okay, so I'm not casting dispersions on therapists and attorneys. I'm not doing that, but just be a little careful. Anyway, once the attorneys are involved, so now they're concerned about your rights. How much time do you have with the children? Who gets the Vegas Golden Knights tickets? Who made the money at the beginning? What do you deserve? So once we get into what we deserve, now it's a battle of wills, and then it becomes a battle. Very often, it might not be that extreme in our own lives. It just might be a situation of where, you're having a discussion with someone and they feel that it's something is super duper important. And because they feel it's important and they're pushing you into a corner, you have a choice. Do you go in the corner and maybe feel like you're being a little bit of a pushover, but your life is more peaceful? Or do you stick up and say, no, I'm not a pushover? Well, that's tonight's topic. Which avenue does Judaism value more? So if you want to just skip the whole episode, I'll give you the answer and then we'll go back and understand it. It's way more important to be happy than it is to be right. That's the way it is. Or to get your rights. Because the Almighty wants us to live great lives. He wants us to be happy. And sometimes being happy means bowing down. Talmud tells us, says it's better to be like a reed that sways in the wind than it is to be strong as a cedar. And the idea is a cedar, it stands up, it takes it all. But when the wind really comes down and you get that hurricane, boom, it's down and it's finished. But a reed, you sway this way, you sway that way. You go this way, you go that way. Very often, the smarter approach is the long term. If I give in over here, if I'm mavater, I give up my rights, so to speak, then I keep the peace. And then the Almighty always will make sure that I get whatever I'm supposed to get. And I do realize I'm getting a little religious here, but Rabbi is my first name. So, please bear with me just for a moment. If a person is living with the reality that there's one God who's doing everything for us, we're never going to get gypped. You're living in a world of tremendous abundance. You're living under a God who has tremendous generosity. God has already given you more than you could ever ask for. So why would you think for a minute that the Almighty is going to allow you to be taken advantage of? It doesn't work that way. Now, yes, of course, there are rules. If you don't ask, you don't get. There you got to pick up and go to work and you got to do what you got to do. But the basic rule in life is, the Almighty is going to give me what I deserve. He's going to give me more than I deserve, actually. And I'm not going to lose by doing the right thing. And very often, doing the right thing means keeping the peace. Keeping the peace is a tremendous value in Judaism. We say that Talmud tells us that a person should strive to be like the students of Aharon. Pursue peace, keep peace. Now, it doesn't say strive to be like Aaron, because you're not going to be like Aaron. Aaron was Moses' brother. It says that when Moses died, everyone, all the men mourned for Moses. But when Aaron died, everyone mourned for Aaron. One reason is it's always easier to be the assistant rabbi than the rabbi. The assistant rabbi is more beloved, right? Moses has got to tell people off. He's got to rebuke people. Aaron never had to rebuke people. But the other issue is that people loved Aaron more because Aaron spent his life making peace between couples. He had a strategy. If two people were arguing, he would go over to one person. He would say, hey, listen, I was speaking with Shlomi over there and he's really sorry. He's just too embarrassed to say he's sorry. And then he'd go over to Shimon and he'd say, I spoke with, the other one and he said he was really sorry, but he's too embarrassed to say he's sorry. But next time you see him, just understand like he really regrets doing what he did or, saying what he said. And then when those two people would meet up with each other, they'd hug each other and they would move on. Most times when we are fighting about things, it's really not worth the fight. A lot of times after you fight for a while, you don't even remember what the fight was all about in the first place. Really a remarkable situation. But this value of peace is tremendous. The Torah tells us that Ein keli shabracha ela shalom. There is no vessel for blessing in our lives than peace. A person has to strive for internal peace. We have to strive for external peace. So getting peace very often means saying, okay, I'm not going to fight. You're right. It's okay. It's all right. Talmud says if you want your prayers to be answered, then you should be mevater your will to others. What does that mevater mean? It means that you're being willing to forgo your rights. Live with forbearance. I'm not going to stick up for what I think I deserve, because now the best way to do that, not you can only do that, but the best way to do that is to live with the reality that God is always taking care of you. I'm not going to lose by creating a peaceful situation. And the end result is you're going to live a happier life. Now, I cannot accentuate more how important it is to live with a smile on your face. The Almighty tells us, greet every person with a smile. The pathway to receiving all blessings is first and foremost gratitude. If we are not focused on gratitude and being grateful for what we have, then the Almighty has no reason to give us more. So one of the Talmud tells us, whoever walks in the way of peace, then peace will walk with him. How do you get peace? You put out peace. Very often one of the reasons you think that you want to stick up for your rights is because you think in the end you'll be better off. But what is better off? What exactly are you looking towards? So a friend of mine, this guy Lionel Ketchum, he founded all these things called the happiness clubs. They're all over the country. And anyway, so he teaches in the University of Stanford. He teaches Stamford in Connecticut. And he teaches a class on happiness. And he always starts off every semester in the following way. He has maybe 30 or 50 kids in the class. And he says, okay, what do you want in your life? And he writes down, a person wants wealth. They want health. They want to get married. They want children. They want prosperity. They want power. They want influence. He writes all these things down. And then he says, okay, now, why do you want all these things? And eventually all the people end up saying, well, the reason I wanted money was because I think it'll lead me to a happy life. The reason I want to get married is because I think it'll lead me to a happy life. The reason I want children is because I think it'll lead me to a happy life. And he goes through all these things. And ultimately he starts off this semester by showing everyone, this is your pursuit. Your pursuit is to be happy. So therefore, if a person is sticking up for their rights and they're saying, no, I'm not going to give up. Why? And they know that by not giving up, they're going to be in for a fight. And they know that fighting doesn't make them happy. Why would they fight? Because they are placing something above the value of being happy. And that is, I don't want to be a pushover. I want to have self-respect. I want to make sure that I have independence. I'm a real person. I'm not a schmata. So we have to recognize that if a person defines their self-respect based on their ability to enjoy their life and bring goodness in the world, they don't always have to be right. See, it's the second way of understanding, like, how do I, what's more important to me? If I'm so worried that I don't want to be a pushover, and that overrides my perception that I can live a peaceful life. So what will end up happening is I won't be a pushover and I'll stick up for my rights. So I won't be a pushover. I'll be an idiot. I'll be a moron. I'll live a horrible life. I'll be fighting with everyone, and I won't be open to God's blessings because I won't have a peaceful life. But I won't be a pushover. But I highly doubt that in any situation, that ultimately not being a pushover will override being happy. So really, we have to define ourselves. We have to define what is our pleasure. Again, we're going to come to this in the next Life is Great podcast, understanding your pleasures. But I wanted to get this point first. Self-respect is a tremendous pleasure. But we have to figure out what's going to give me self-respect. Is it I'm not a pushover? Is it I'm sticking up for my rights? Or is it I'm bringing peace into the world? And when I bring peace into the world, very often that means that I will have to, whatever you say. And if a person has that attitude, then they can design their world in a very, very nice way. So to kind of a little in conclusion like this, I just want to share with you the Jewish value is better to be happy than right. You don't have to stick up for your rights. Have your self-esteem, your self-perception. Define that, your self-respect. Have that very connected with your ability to live a happy life and to bring peacefulness into the world. Understand that there's one God who's already given you more than you could ever ask for, who will always make sure that you won't end up with the short end of the stick if you are willing to bring peace into the world and to help others. All right. So before we go, I want to bring around over here our producer, Dana Rutherford, who shares with us some of the questions that you listeners send in to her. So come on in, Dana. Welcome. Here we go. Hello.
Okay, so we have 3 great questions today. And the first one says, in what scenario should you forego being happy and take a firm stance on being right?
See, only if someone is having you do an evil thing. Now, evil, I would define as going against the Torah. It's really against Judaism. And then you have to stand up. I'll tell you something. Listen, I have 3 siblings, and it is against Jewish law for a Jewish person to marry a non-Jew. That is against Jewish law. Now, all 3 of my siblings married non-Jews. And all 3 of my siblings, I did not go to any of the weddings. And the first person, my sister did it, and then my brother. And I'm, to this very day, many, many years later, I'm very, very close with both of those 2 siblings. But my third brother, the eldest of us, so he said, no. He said, if you don't come to my wedding, I have no relationship with you. Now, with each one of my siblings, I said the same thing. I said, listen, I love you. I care for you. You're my brother. You're my sister. I'll always love you. I'll always be with you. But I cannot support this decision. And I know you're marrying nice people. That's not the issue. But the issue is, in Judaism, it's a really, really big mistake to marry out of the Jewish religion, to have a Jew marry outside the religion. That is worthy of its own Life is Great podcast, which we will do one. We will do one on that. But I can't be part of this, but as long as your spouse is good to you, I have gratitude to the spouse, and of course I'll be respectful. Of course but and that's how it is. So 2 of my siblings accepted that. The third one did not. And the third one really didn't have a relationship with anyone eventually. And the idea is because, again, he stood up for his right. He said, no, if you don't accept my spouse, then I can't accept you. So he eventually did not accept me or any of his children, any of his nieces his niece and a whole gaggle of nephews, and now great nieces and great nephew, right? So he forgo the major part of the Wyne family because of that particular thing. So when you stand up for it, you can always stand up with a smile on your face. And just because you're sticking up for something, there's a way to do it. But the answer to the question is, when do you stick up for it? When someone is asking you to do something that is immoral or evil in the eyes of the Torah.
Excellent. Okay, the next one says, do you need to experience a certain amount of sadness in your life in order to appreciate the happiness, or is keeping sadness in your life a kind of melancholy trap that stops us from living fully?
Now, I got to tell you, a little bit of sadness is great. It does give you, like God created a very complex world. People are complex, and we should be complex. We should have complex experiences. And so therefore, that's why you have happy experiences. You have sad experiences. You have experiences that will, the idea is, of course, to pull from the sad experiences, allow them to be more the trampoline effect. You go down in order to come up. So if you're able to use your sad experiences in such a way, that's fantastic. But we do have, we have a National Day of Mourning, Tisha B'Av, which helps us appreciate loss. We have a series of, something called the Sphira, right, which we happen to be in right now. That's why my beard's a little long. I'm not a little scraggly because we're not shaving or cutting our hair. And it's a quasi period of mourning. And these periods of mourning are to help us appreciate the good times specifically. So we have those.
Excellent. And then the last one is from my own dad.
Ooh,
and it says, what's the difference between joy and happiness? How do you attain and keep either and or both?
So joy is anticipation of future good, and happiness is the appreciation of the moment right now. That's the difference. Some people, it's easier to focus on the moment and be very happy now. And some people, by focusing on the good that's coming to them later on, that's really what inspires them and gives them the energy and the happiness. So that's the difference. And the answer is we have to work on both. You have to work on both. So happiness can be attained best by appreciating what you have, playing your happiness game. And joy can be attained by literally creating situations to look forward to. All right? Okay, so please send us your questions. You can email them to rabbiyitzwyne@gmail.com, rabbiyitzwyne@gmail.com. You're listening to the Life is Great podcast. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, Rabbi.
And thank you for listening. And we will catch you next week on the LIG Podcast.